Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining AIB.com. This is SQL Server Database Administration and Development presented by Yosef. This is Chapter 3. If you haven't seen Chapter 2 and Chapter 1, it is advisable to see that one first because this is an extension of Chapter 2 and Chapter 1. In this lesson, we'll see how can we create a database from scratch, and we'll see how can we specify owner of the database, and there are two different types that are important for a database to be created. These are primary files and log file. We'll see them in depth. We'll also see how can we create tables, specify columns, data types and properties of a column using SQL Server Management Studio. In addition to this, we'll see how can we specify key, that is primary key for a table or tables, and we'll see how can we create a relationship between tables. As an example, we'll use a student registration system, and for that matter, we'll use different tables related to students. The first table that we will see is a student table by itself. A student table will have student ID, first name, last name, sex, age, department ID, address, city, and state. In addition to this, we'll see how can we create department table and create a relationship between department and student table. We'll also see how can we create a faculty table, and the faculty table can be related with a department table through faculty ID. We'll see how can we create that. In addition to this, we'll see how can we create an instructor table, course grade, and course table. Course grade is very important to keep the grades of students, and we'll see how can we create course table, and we'll see how can we create a relationship between them. After we create our student registration table, the table relationship should look like this one. As you can see here, there should be first a faculty table. The faculty table should relate with the department table through faculty ID. That means faculty ID in the department table is considered as a foreign key, and faculty ID in faculty table is considered as a primary key. And department table will have department ID, department name, faculty ID, and department head. Department ID can be saved as a primary key in the department table, and will be saved considered as a foreign key in the student table. And the student table can be related with the department table through department ID. After we create department ID, faculty ID, and student information, we can directly creating the course table. The course table should have course number, course title, and credit hour as column names. Course number should be a primary key that can be referenced by course student table, as you can see here. In addition to that, the course number in the instructor table can use the course table. As you can see here, the tables are arranged hierarchically. So the first table that should come into our mind when we create this student registration system is faculty table. It doesn't matter which table you should first create, but it's very advisable to start from bottom to up. So in this case, unless you create a faculty table, because you cannot save data of a department, it's better to create first a faculty table. And after you create the faculty table, you can create department table. After you create department table, because student table is dependent on department table, you can create student table. After you create student table, or you can create a course table, and then after you create a course table and student table, you can create course student table, because course student table is a table that uses course number from course table, student ID from student table. After you create that one, you can create the instructor table, that is the 6th one, and the 7th table in this small student registration system is instructor course. We'll add more tables to this student registration system, and this student registration system will be full-fledged. So the question that will come to your mind is, how can we create this? It's very simple. The first thing that you should do to create tables in SQL Server Management Studio is, first you have to go to Start menu. As you can see here, there is a Start button. Click Start button, go to All Programs, select any SQL Server version you have. In my case, I have SQL Server 2012 and I have SQL Server 2008 R2. So click on SQL Server 2012 and click on SQL Server Management Studio. After you do that, the first thing that you should do before you create a table is creating the database. and you have to wait until Visual Studio SQL Server Management Studio loads, and when it loads it will tell you what version of SQL Server 2012 you are running. And after you do this, SQL Server Management Studio will display this. As you can see, this window, this is a connect to server window. This window has different options. The first option that you will see is database engine or the server type. There are different server types that you should specify, like if you are running analysis service, SQL Server integration service, or reporting service, you have to specify what type of service you are running. So that is the server type that you are running. In our case, because we are creating a database, we have to select database engine. And the server name by default is a local server, in our local machine, the server name is dot, and then you have to specify that. If you have a specific named server, you can specify named server. If you have Yosef as a server name, then you can specify that one. After you do that, the next thing is you have to identify which authentication technique you are using. If you are using Windows authentication, you have to select Windows authentication. If you are using SQL Server authentication, you can click SQL Server authentication. You have to specify login and password. We will see how can we secure our database. That time you will be familiarized with authenticating users through SQL Server. For time being, we don't need to use that one, and then connect will automatically connect to our server. As you can see here, we are connected to our server. We will start creating a database. Before we create a new table, before you create any object other than database, you have to first go to your server and create a database. How can you create a database? It's very simple. What you should do is right click on this database, right click and select new database. Again, come here to the database, right click on it, new database, and it will bring you this window. This window has different options. The first one is the database name. You have to give meaningful name as a database name. For example, student info is my database name. You have to specify the owner. The owner of this database by default is the user of this local machine. If you want to specify, if you have Active Directory already configured into your machine, you can specify the owner of that database. The other thing that you should be careful is the files that are created in respect with the database. When you say student information, there are two files that are created. The first one is a student info table, that is a primary table. We need at least one primary table, and we need a log file to keep the transaction log of your database. So these two should be created, and as a convention, it's better to use the same name for the primary file and the same name underscore log for a log file. And that's the thing that you should be careful. When you come to option, you can specify different options for this database. For example, if you want to just shrink automatically your database when it goes out of the limit of the database that you specified, you can select this one. The recovery mode, you can select either full, bulk, and or simple. Actually, we will come to that point. Correlation is, for example, if you want to specify your data based on if your data be case sensitive, what you should do is you have to specify correlation in here, and there are different correlation techniques. We will come to that point. And the file groups, there is one primary file by default. You cannot delete this primary file if it is a primary file. That's why the remove button is disabled, and you can add any number of files in here, and then you can relate with your database. And we'll come to that point when we deal with database administration. Right now, let's just click on OK. It means student information table database is automatically created. As you can see here, student info database is created, and then if you scroll this way, you will see the database that you created. Now this database is blank or empty unless you create a table, unless you create different objects like views, store procedure, function, triggers. This database is just empty. How can we create table? Before you use other objects, we deal with tables. As I mentioned earlier, the first table that you should create is faculty table, and then we'll see how can you create the faculty table. We'll see how can we create the second table, that is department table, and we'll see how can we create other tables one by one. And in the next session we'll see how can we do that, and keep looking at this, and then we'll continue from the next chapter on. Thank you very much for watching this. This is Yosef Adunya Kasai from yayobi.com.